It is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Connie Podesta. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Good morning.
You've got to be the best speaker in dentistry.
Oh no.
I've had so many people tell me that.
I may be the funniest speaker in dentistry.
You may be the funniest. Connie says she hates long introductions, so let me sum her up in just 25 words. 25 years, 2 million people, 1,000 organizations, Hall of Fame speaker, award-winning author, 7 books, former radio, TV personality, comedian, human behavior expert, and what we all probably could use now and then, a therapist. Bottom line,
no, that's enough. That's
enough. So
you're probably the one that could use a therapist the most.
You know what?
People are applauding now as they're listening to this.
Every time I find a therapist after like the 3rd or 4th session, they quit the profession and they leave.
Oh no, I wouldn't.
They said they gave up. But so you've spoke to 1,000 organizations. How is dentistry different than all the other industries? Or is it the same?
No, it's unique. It's not that there's not other industries like it, but dentists are CEOs and they run a business and they have to sell and they have to market and they have to have cost centers and they have to train their employees and they have to do HR. I mean, it's a company, but they don't act like that. They don't act like they're a CEO. They don't act like they have to train and market. And let me give a disclaimer before I get 1,000 emails or Twitter. This is not every dentist, okay? There's some listening right now and with us who totally do that. But on the average, and it's same with doctors. You know, I mean, physicians of everything, dentists of doctors, but I mean, anyone in that area, therapist. You know, these self-care help people go into it and they don't want to even think of it being in a company. They don't want to even think that money and profits make any difference. They want to kind of think that they're in a for the good of mankind type of profession, and that if they talk about money or talk about sales or talk about closing deals or talk about marketing or talk about training, then that takes them away from the genuineness of helping others. And so that's a little different. Most people, even churches now, will say we're a business and we have to run it like a business. So I would say that most of the work I do with dentists is just about that, how to wrap their brain, head, mind, and heart around the concept that you can be really good to people and want to help people and want to make a difference in people's lives and still be a really genuinely fine business person.
It reminds me of the most interesting conversation I ever had. It was with a Catholic priest from, I believe it was Fort Scott, Kansas, and he had his mind blown. He was in the seminary for 8 years. 8 years reading the Bible. Then he graduated and he's thrown in charge of a church with an elementary school that's in debt and
he's now a CEO.
And he's like, I had zero training for that. So then the same thing if you're a dentist, you go to school 8 years and you're ready to sit down and do the biggest calculus, geometry, trigonometry problem. And they're and it's worse because when you talk about training staff, when you talk about marketing to other people, when you talk about selling dentistry, they got accepted because they had great science skills.
Right.
So it naturally unselects the people. I mean, if you went to college and had a great time and a great personality and went on dates and concerts and were the life of the party, you would have never got accepted into med school, dental school, law school. So what do you do with all these dentists who want to be in the library doing science? And when I ask them, and we poll, so these aren't gut feelings. We've been polling dentists on Dental Town since 1998. I'm going to say, what stresses you out the most? It's their own team.
Oh, totally.
And then you say...
And they're stressing team out the most. It's very mutual. You know, if you ask the team, what's your biggest stressor? It'll be the dentist. They'll say the dentist. And so...
You got to nip this whole thing about. You need to start lecturing to only deans. You should go to deans and say you're accepting the wrong guy.
Well, it's not that they're
want a math major.
The wrong guy, but they're not teaching it as a business. No, I would imagine, and you are the expert, in very few dental schools are there courses about leadership, management, marketing, sales, training, competency, HR. I mean, so they're not being taught anything in school, you know, about, you know, even as a teacher, when I was going through education, yes, I was taught how to teach kids, but I was also taught about management and discipline and running a classroom. And I mean, we were taught other areas, not just going in there and teaching, because there's a lot more. And so I find it with a lot of, like I said, healthcare type professionals, is that nowhere in school was it even brought up that, oh, by the way, this is a company and this is a business and you're going to have employees and some of them are going to need to be fired and you're not going to have any documentation and then you can't fire them or get sued and then everyone else is going to quit because they can't stand the person that you can't fire. So they're going to go leave and you're going to be stuck with this person for the rest of your life. No one bothers to mention that to them.
Yeah, it's funny because high turnover, in my walnut brain, high turnover means something's wrong with HR. I mean, when you talk about staff training, the easiest way to train staff, like next Monday, my Lori has been with me 20 years. I mean, I had a whole mess of people that have been with me 20 to 30 years. And I go into office and no one's been there 2 years, except this one girl. She's been there 15 and she's the doctor's favorite. And he doesn't even realize that that's the toxic bombshell. I mean, if you got one person that's been with you 10 and no one else stays 2.
Yeah,
that's algebra. Simple algebra. You should, but so is it just a mindset? I mean, okay, so when you said selling, I mean, God, they think that's a 4-letter word.
Oh, I know.
And I mean, they honestly believe that a good doctor doesn't sell. And they tell you, I didn't go to school 8 years to be sell. I'm a doctor. I'm the best dentist in Dallas. And you're like, okay.
But every time, and what I share with my dentist, I said, every time you smile when you walk in the room, every time you ask them a question, how is your day? Every time you explain to them so that they can understand the procedure that you're doing, every time you connect with them, that's selling. Selling, dentists often have a misconception, a very poor one, of what selling is. Selling isn't just pushing a product or a service on someone. Selling is getting someone's buy-in and consensus. So if a dentist is selling and their staff are selling, it starts from the minute I walk in the door. What's the climate like? What's the environment like? How do people greet me? How do they get along with each other? How does the dentist relate to me? How does he connect, or she? How do they connect with their team? That's all. Selling starts way before I'm brought into a room and given the treatment plan and told how I can, put this on my credit card for the next 60 months.
And the dentist doesn't realize his dirty little secrets that the receptionist hates the hygienist. How long does it take for a new patient to pick up interstaff conflict?
Well, for some patients, they will never pick it up, but I've quit 2 dentists, and the only reason why I've left both of them, and both of them I felt were very clinically skilled, very technically competent. Both of them I left because the toxicity within the office, you could feel it between the dentist and a couple of the staff. You could feel it between some of the staff. I could tell when I went back to the front desk that no one liked that woman, and that's not fun. I mean, no one wants to go to a therapist or a doctor or a dentist. I mean, we are all three. I'm a therapist, you're a dentist, a physician, whatever. None of us in these professions are people dying to come see us. And so it has to be a very pleasurable experience to get us to want to come back.
And talk about what you mean by when you say you're a therapist.
Well, for 30 years I was an LPC, that's called a licensed professional counselor. I have a graduate degree in human relations and counseling with another 15, 20 hours on top of that. So for many years I did private therapy. So, people would come into my office. I worked in a huge clinic. I worked alongside psychiatrists. And I'm still using all of those tools. So when I speak, and I'm also a stand-up comedian, and that's really weird because those are 2 totally different parts of the brain. Comedy is very right brain, creative, out there, impulsive, spontaneous, and therapy is very left brain, dig deep, look at the psychological aspects and ramifications of every action or move. But it served me really well because when I'm talking to groups, I'm very, very funny, laugh out loud funny, but my humor is not jokes. My humor is they're laughing because they're like, oh my God, I just did that. I just said that yesterday. Someone just used that on me to get their way with me. So they're laughing because I bring people up to a place where they're so self-aware of what they do. And I help, especially dentists. You know, there's so many professions, and dentists certainly aren't the only one, where they also never had any training in school in psychology, which is the understanding of why people do what they do, say what they say, react the way they react, behave the way they behave. If you don't know that, and someone yells or hollers, or your brain has no idea of what to make of that, how to handle that, how to react to that. So you just kind of, you know, let whatever comes out of your mouth come out of your mouth. So I teach my clients, here is the psychology of human behavior. Here's what makes people want to work for you. Here's what makes them want to sell for you. Here's what makes them want to come to you for their dental treatments. Here's what makes them want to walk away from you. Here's what makes them want to leave your practice and never enter your door again. And most dentists, they've never heard that before. You know, that the first time I did a session for ADA, in the morning we had maybe 400 people. In the afternoon I had like 1,500 with standing room only. Because in the morning no one had heard of me, and I started talking about all the things we're talking about now. Why do people do what they do? And I always say, psychology equals money. Psychology equals big money. Because the secret of making money, the secret of running a good business, the secret of any business entrepreneurship or, you know, attempt is to understand the nature of human beings. And the more you understand, the more you will increase your market share. And the less you understand, the less you're going to keep good help, the less you're going to keep good staff, the less you're going to keep good patients.
So let's, God, there's so many where places I want to go. I think I'm going to start real dark.
Good.
When I got out of school 30 years ago in '87, dentists really thought and believed they had the highest suicide rate. And now, because of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and all that, the armed services have taken off the charts. But we've been having a spate of suicides lately. We just had Anthony Bourdain, who was successful. Kate Spade, they're all from here. David Spade grew up here, and so does brother.
But success has nothing to do with suicide.
Well, I just want to say that since I've been here 30 years, every year a dentist in Phoenix commits suicide. Last year it was 3. So let's start at the bottom. So what did you ever hear back in the day?
But let me ask you a question.
That dentists had a high suicide rate?
Are you comparing that to how many sheet metal workers commit suicide each year and how many therapists commit suicide? Are you comparing that? I mean, is one dentist a year more than...
Oh, I don't know.
So
I'm not an expert in that.
No, but I wasn't trying to... But I'm saying it could be that's... It
normal.
isn't. It could be not normal. That's abnormally correct. Let's put it that way. Not normal to commit suicide, but abnormal correct. But I don't want to get into suicide because I can't answer that, or I'm not an expert on it. But I can tell you that in dentistry, and I coach a lot of dentists and work with a lot of their teams. In dentistry, there's a really high degree of unhappiness. And unhappiness and sadness can definitely, lead to choices that aren't healthy or safe for you. And I tried to look, at why are some dentists unhappier than some other professions I know.
And you do believe that dentistry is probably unhappier than other professions?
Not dentistry as a whole, but there's a lot of people unhappy with their job, but you can see why. It doesn't pay any money. It sucks. It's dirty. It's dangerous. It's horrible. There's no respect, okay? So and there's a lot of industries that are like that. They're not doing what they want to. So that makes sense. When you have lots of negative factors and people end up unhappy, well, you go, okay, well, that gets... But I'm working with some dentists, or have, not now, but have worked with some dentists who are making great money, and they have a nice home, and they have a decent staff, and they're doing a job that's very, very respected, and they're not in a dirty job, they're not in a dangerous job, and yet they're still unhappy. So that's where I'm trying to look at why would that be. I did find very early on in working with dentists that many of them are unhappy because this was never the job they wanted. They didn't choose this. You know, it's like the boy whose dad played on the football team. And, you know, I remember, I'm going to share with you a session years and years and years ago. I was counseling two families, both of whom had a 16-year-old boy try to commit suicide. And one boy was the most amazing, is it flautist? When you play the flute, that's a flautist or flutist? But anyway, he could play the flute. It was unbelievable. And the other boy was a soccer player, top, probably could go to the Olympics. So why are these boys suicidal? The boy that could play the flute and 2 or 3 other instruments, his father was on a major football team, major player football team. And the boy who could play soccer and was unbelievably athletic, his father was a musician. So both fathers were disappointed in their sons, okay? And it brought me to tears because I just wanted to go back to their birth and go and switch the babies, you know? Because had they been switched, they would have been fine, correct? Each one would have been lauded and applauded and validated for what, but because their families didn't value what they did. And so I'm finding in dentistry, there's a lot of dentists who didn't want to do this. In fact, it appalled them. It disgusted them. I've had dentists say that. But their dad and their granddad, and you've got the dentistry going, and it's in the town, and they're on every committee, and they're on the boards, and they've gotten so much notoriety and so much fame, and so there was never a choice in their mind. And
Ryan, isn't that amazing what she's saying? Because my 4 boys, ever since they're this tall, everywhere I've ever taken them, every dentist said, "So are you going to be a dentist like your daddy?" And then when they started going into their own, because I always told them, I said, Dad only wants you to be happy and healthy. You know, I really disappointed my dad because he owned 9 Sonic drive-ins, and he wanted me to drop out of high school and start a drive-in in, where was it? A small town, Hutchinson, Kansas, and Kearney, Nebraska, and all that stuff like that. And all of his franchise friends, their sons were dropping out of high school.
So see, here you went to school, did something that very few men can accomplish, or women, did something very smart, required a lot of skill, but yet you were a disappointment to him. And so that's one reason. I have found that there's a great number of dentists who, for whatever reason, knew early on they did not want to do this, but the thought of even, you know, and it's very similar, I'm going to compare dentists to farmers here, but in agriculture, the same type of thing. It's the family farm. It's been there forever. Your great-great-grandfather, we have worked and they've got a son who just wants to go to school I got to
interrupt for one second. Ryan's grandfather was kicked out of the family will because he was the first one in the family to leave the dairy farm and go to Wichita State University and become an engineer. Right. And his mother wrote him off for death.
So you have that one thing. You have dentists who, and it's stronger in dentistry or agriculture when it's stronger in the industries where the family owns the business and it's been handed down. And it could be like Woolworths. You know, I think I watched a show about Woolworths about the third son. I don't want to do a 5 and dime store. So that's one thing. I've seen and definitely talked and counseled some dentists who wanted to be a surgeon or wanted to be something else, and it wasn't going to happen, or for whatever reason, the family sees the surgeon in the family as better than the dentist in the family, which is a perception that's not accurate. But if that's the family you're in, you know, if someone sees the surgeon as better than the dentist or better than the CPA or better than, you know, the great guy who stays home and raises his kids while, you know, whatever your other choices. So I've had some dentists whose families don't respect what he's doing as much as a sibling. And then I have a lot of dentists who are just unhappy because it isn't what they thought. It's they don't want to run a business, and all of the staff and they just hate it They thought they'd be in business for themselves. That's what some of them thought. They thought, I don't have to go to work. I don't have to report to anybody. I don't have to have a boss. I'm going to run my own company, which is kind of the American dream. Not with the millennials. They know that's not true because they watch their parents screw that up. But back in that age, they thought that if they owned their own business, and then they get to it and they're not free at all. They have compliance issues and regulations and all sorts of insurance, and there's so much more to it. And they would just, I use the term dental, they would just like to go dentaling around. They would just like to go in their room and dental all day. That's really, they just want to dental, right? Do their dentaling stuff. And they can't be that isolated. There's so much more to it. So I'm just giving you a few reasons why some dentists, but I have to tell you, in this last few years, I'm not seeing it like I did 10 or 15 years ago. I think today, if a young man doesn't want to be a dentist, he'll tell his dad, Dad, too bad, or a young woman, too bad, I don't want to do this. You'll have to sell the business. I think more of them are understanding it's a business because they get it, especially if they grew up in their mom or dad's business. So I'm seeing dentists a lot happier now and a lot more creative and a lot more fun with their teams, and so I think it's good news.
Yeah, because we were little, you couldn't, our generation couldn't really communicate with your parents what you thought. What you felt.
But now they are. They're communicating a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe for some of us older, too much. But anyway, let's get into good things about dentistry.
Okay, well let's, so I want to go, I want you to address this. So the average American between age 16 and 76 will purchase 13 new cars.
Okay.
The median price is $33,500. They finance over 5 years, 60 months. When I go into every zip code in America, 5%, 1 in 20 dentists, sells a median price of a new car, $33,000 case, damn near every week. They do a full mouth rehab, all on 4 implants, all this. And then the other 7 people in the same medical dental building say, our town's broke, there's no money, nobody can afford this, it's insurance only, blah, blah, blah. So how does the Americans, they buy a new car every 5 years?
Because it's fun.
But then...
Because it's fun.
But why can 1 out of 20 dentists convince you that you have 7 cavities, you need 3 crowns, root canals, and implant, and they just throw you the whole case, and they do it all day long. And then the other ones walk in there and say, well, Connie, unfortunately...
Okay, you want the answer?
Unfortunately, your insurance will only cover...
Okay, here's the answer. The one dentist, I like him or her. I like him or her. I trust them. I believe in them. I don't think they're full of crap. I don't think they're selling me a bill of goods so that they can pay their next house payment. I believe them. I believe that they wouldn't be telling me anything that's not true. I believe that they would do everything they can to save me money. I believe that they will try to save my teeth as much as they can before rushing into some treatment I don't need. I believe them. I don't believe the other 6.
So how do you build believability and trust when we're selling invisible? You know that this is bottled water. You know this is an iPhone. But when I tell you have 4 cavities, that's invisible.
No, you're not invisible, though. You're the one that's telling me that. And I have an intuition. We all have an intuitive feeling about people. Okay? And part of the problem now that I really see, for example, as a speaker, professional speaker, I am one of the very few speakers who pretty much answers my own phone, and if you want to hire me, you will talk to me. You don't have to go through somebody. I've never had a salesperson, I've never had a marketing person. I'm the product. I'm the one that can sell myself better than anyone else. And so what we have now is all this outsourcing, and I get it, dentists are hugely busy, and so am I, but I want that connection, because if the client doesn't trust me, they're not going to bring me in and pay me unbelievably great money and entrust their whole staff with me or their whole audience with me. And so let's say, and this is where dentists need so much more work on hiring and firing and putting people in the right position and watching what's happening. If I come in And I just intuitively like you. Our personalities connect. You're funny. You tell me what you're doing. Everything about your treatment I like. And by the third or fourth visit, I'm sold. I believe in you. I trust you. I think you do the right thing. And then we have the whole set, and it's time for the whole plan. And you send me to, Wanda Ruru or whoever in her little office, who is now the one that's going to tell me that I need to finance $33,000, and I don't like her at all. Maybe she's snooty, maybe she's not friendly, maybe she's overworked and harassed, maybe she doesn't know I don't care what it is, but I don't like her. And guess what? I'm not going to do it. And so a dentist keeps saying to me, I'm a great guy, why can't I sell? Because you're not selling. You sent me over to her, or you're sending your people over to her. And so it's really important that whoever they are entrusting to do their selling, whoever they're entrusting, they don't call it selling, they call sharing the plan. Okay, whoever they're entrusting to share their treatment plan has to pretty much mimic and reflect their own personality. Because if I like the dentist, then I'm going to like someone who is a clone of the dentist. And they don't usually do that. If the dentist is bottom line and structured and detailed, the odds are that dentist will hire somebody who's outgoing and friendly. If the dentist is outgoing and friendly, they'll probably hire someone. I need someone in my office detailed. Well, that's a real problem when it comes to sales, because if I like the dentist because of your personality, then it's going to be very hard for me to attach to someone who's selling me and asking me for money who I don't like.
Well, it's amazing because in their walnut brain, if my dental office costs $1 a month, an overhead, if they do $1 a month in dentistry, their overhead's 100%. So most of them think, well, the way I'll lower my overhead is I'll try to buy cheaper gauze and not pay my staff and not give medical insurance and just keep cutting costs until everything's dead.
And then they have, I talk to staffs without dentists. Oh my God. I wish I could tape it, but it's too private. But when you keep going back to you get what you pay for, and you do. Patients aren't stupid. They know when you're cutting costs. And what you get when it's the same way in speaker fees. People will say to me, Connie, your speaker fee is too high. And I said, but it's not too high for what I'm giving you. You may not want what I'm giving. You may not want the amount of stuff I'm going to teach you and the amount of money I can bring into your business and the amount of work I can do to help your team be better. You may not want that, but my fee's not too high. But being cheap on anything, if they're going to cut costs, I've been in dentist's office where they've cut costs and the team is miserable. If people aren't getting paid what they're worth and they're not valued, then they do the least amount of work possible. And they're miserable and they're not happy and they're ticked off every day they come to work and they're unhappy. And we feel the energy in the air the minute we walk in.
If your overhead's $1 a month, you need to do $2 a month in dentistry, and you can't cut costs on your electricity, your taxes, your labor. You can't cut your way to zero. But if your office costs $1 a month, you can sell your way to $2. But they hate sales, and it's so frustrating. And what I don't understand is, a lot of people they just start with the worst tooth. Because they don't want to tell, they're like, well, I can't tell Connie she has 11 cavities. But when I went to a physician, I wouldn't want the physician saying, well, I can't tell him he's going to have a heart attack and prostate cancer. I'll just,
lie.
I'd want to know the whole physical. I wouldn't, so it's so tough. So let's go back to staff. So when I go into dental offices, I've always said that I can smell a successful dental office in 2 seconds. It's fun, it's friendly, everybody's jovial. Yeah. And then you go in the other 95%, and it's like a library, it's weird. You go up front and they hand you a deal to sign in like you're a cow. We still have an Awatuki, we still have some that slide the glass over. You slide the glass over and you're like, so I'm waiting for her to come over and just like brand me, like a rockin' our dental patient.
Well, partners is not often working.
Partners?
Partners, because there's a tendency, so many dentists partner with someone that they wouldn't even go have a beer with, you know, and they're purposely thinking, well, he or she's going to bring another dimension. You know, I'm bad at this, so they're going to do this, and I'm good at this, and he can't do that, or she can't do that. But now you've messed up the office because, you know, everybody gravitates towards one personality, and now what happens is we have teams now, teams against teams, and even though one's on one side and one's on the other, it's, you know, it's like when we used to have no smoking areas at the back of the airplane. There was really smoke everywhere. Okay,
so I can still remember. Do you remember any flights with smoking on it?
I would be in the row right in front of the smoking area.
I tell my boys about that. They don't even believe me.
Yeah, so the smoke was everywhere. Well, it's kind of like that. And I always say to dentists, you know, before you go into a partnership, kind of think about, you know, you're sharing office space, you're sharing teams, but most of all, you're sharing breathing space and you're sharing energy. And that energy is going to be felt. So, you know, if you have a good rapport and a good team, making a little less money might be in the long run.
Well, you know, it's funny because when they come out of school, everybody in the world was well aware that, you know, half the marriages end in divorce. And by the way, that number is coming down, but it's coming down just technically. The reason it's coming down is that after World War II, they were getting married at 16, 17, 18. So they were married to someone until 26, and then they got divorced, and that counts as divorce. Millennials are getting married a decade later than World War II. So if you live with a guy for 7 years and then you broke up, and so the divorce rate's coming down because you're not counting.
Right, the living.
Like I got a friend who tells everybody she's never been married, but she's lived with 4 different guys for 10 years.
Right.
So then I know then I have another girlfriend
that's pretty smart
who doesn't
of her.
want to go out and date because she feels so shameful. She goes, I can't go out and date. I mean, I've been divorced 4 times. So one who never signed the paper, she's like, oh, I've never been married.
Right.
And this one's like, oh my God, I've been divorced 4 times. And they both have the same exact life. But the point I was making is this, is that they're all aware that marriages fail. But they have no one ever talks about the fact that when 2 dentists become a partner, or 2 physicians, or 2 lawyers, those fail too.
Yeah. Oh,
and
big
those
time.
are uglier than divorces because you're not, when you divorce someone, like when I had my divorce, I mean, she's the mother of my 4 kids, I wouldn't argue, I just like, where do I sign? But when you are divorcing someone that you don't make love to, you don't have children with, you don't have families, you know, they go to war. I mean, they go nuclear. There's one divorce in my backyard that was like each dentist paid almost $500,000 in legal fees over 5 years. Yeah. They paid $1 million in legal. So
because there's so much anger. But anyway, you know, you made one comment here that I find disturbing. You say on one hand, dentists aren't always making the money they want, correct? And they are, some of them not having an easy time, and yet they don't want to sell. Is that correct? And then they shouldn't be dentists. I mean, it's just as simple as that. I can't think of a job. In fact, if you don't want to sell, there is no job. You should just never have a job and be homeless, because there's not a job that doesn't involve selling. And so if you have a mindset, I don't want to sell, then it's not going to happen. The problem is, instead of going on the bandwagon and screaming from the top of the roof, I don't want to sell, they should do a little psychology on themselves and figure out why selling, they perceive it as a bad thing. That's the key. And one of the things, in my last dental group is several hundred people, and we were working and we talked about this. I said, dentists don't have a hard time with selling. They have a hard time asking for money. That's 2 different things, okay? They have a hard time asking for money. And they're not the only ones. A lot of people have a hard time asking for money. They don't want to see themselves in that position that they have to ask someone, you know, to give them money. And it goes way back to childhood. And I talk about, one of the stories I tell on stage all the time is when people say, when did you know you're a good salesperson? And I said, I guess I knew it, you know, around 8 or 9. I was 8 or 9 years old. I was in the 4th grade. And I had been called out of class to the principal's office, and I walk in, and my dad had been called out of work. He's in one chair, empty chair for me in the middle, my mom on the other side, very ominous, everyone's mad. And they proceed, principal and superintendent, to tell my mom and dad that I am charging girls a nickel to go to the bathroom, which is true. I was. Well, but I said I wasn't charging them to go to the bathroom, because even at 8, I knew that was really creepy. But I was charging, and they said, well, what are you charging them for? And I said, well, I charge a nickel in the bathroom. Well, what for? And I said, because I'm really good at answering questions. And everybody has questions that make them sad. And so if a girl comes in and she has a question, I usually have an answer that helps, and then she pays me a nickel. Well, that was the end of that. We walked to the car. Now, for all the dentists and staff and everybody listening, I want you to go back to childhood and just think for a minute the messages you got about money. You know, a lot of people get let's say they grew up with not much money, and then the message is, well, we don't have much money, but we're really good, honest people. Well, what does that mean? That means people with money are what?
Not
idiots.
honest.
Horrible. They're dishonest. They're not loving people. They're not good people. Or they had a lot of money, but no one was home and everybody fought, and so money is now the root of all evil. So a lot of dentists grew up in homes where the money message and the message about money was very dysfunctional, very dysfunctional. And so when you have a dysfunctional perception of money, you cannot sell. So here were my messages. We walked to the car. My mom gave me the first message about money. She was the one that wrote the checks and tried to save and everything. And her message was that I had totally mortified her. That was her word. I've mortified her. She can never go in front of other women again, and I am never to charge. I had to promise her I would never charge a nickel to any little girl again, and I promised. My dad said nothing. So later that afternoon, he asked me to go with him to the hardware store. Any major conversation my dad and I had about life was in the car on the way to the hardware store. So we're in it, and he looks at me, and he was a salesman, and he was a really good salesman. And he looks at me and says, so how good are you? And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, how many questions can you answer? Like if 5 girls asked you a question, how many could you answer? And I said, well, like 4. And he said, then charge a dime. And I said, but Mom said I couldn't charge a nickel. And he said, I don't want you to ever charge a nickel again either. Charge a dime. So I had 2 very different messages about money, right? One was it was horrible and terrible what I was doing. And had I listened to my mom's message, and bless her heart, but I would have not be where I'm at now. I have no trouble selling and asking money for the value I bring to the table. No trouble at all. I'm not greedy. I'm not selfish. I don't do bad things with money. I give it away. I share it. I'm generous. But I have no trouble looking someone in the eye and asking them for money in return for the value I bring to the table. But that's because I chose my dad's message. My dad's message was, if you're good at something, then charge what you're worth. And I said, well, what if I'm not good? And he said, then people will stop paying you anything. Well, there it is, right? There's the best money message in the world. If you're good, keep charging until you reach your limit. If you're not good and you don't deserve it, which I think a lot of dentists, I've heard them say, well, I don't know if I deserve all of this money. And that comes from childhood too.
Okay, so we talked about, we're talking about the psychology, the therapy of selling. This is the reality of most dental offices. When the doc gets done doing this root canal for an hour, when he's done, he just runs straight to his office and shuts the door. He doesn't want to deal with the staff. It's just stressful. He's happiest when he's in his private office and the door's shut. Yet when I watch we just watched the NBA finals with the LeBron James. The coaches are walking the floor. They're trading players. They're totally involved in the game. If that dentist was that coach, he would have stayed in the locker room.
But see,
during the whole game.
I hunted and hunted till I found a dentist that doesn't do that at all. And that's what dentists have to realize. We're making choices now. Used to, there was one dentist kind of in a neighborhood or in our neighborhood, or one that your parents had gone to forever. No one was dentist shopping. Now we doctor shop and dentist shop and therapist shop. And, if someone comes to me once or twice and doesn't think I'm doing a great job with them, I'll never see or hear from them again. And so, you know, I wanted a new dentist when we moved, and I went to 2, tried each one 2 or 3 times, one twice, both of them twice. And 1, the staff was horrible, and 2, the dentist did exactly what you said. He had absolutely no conversation with me, and when he was done, he walked away. And I never went back. And who I have now is amazing. So dentists have to be aware that they no longer have the option of being who they'd like to be, or maybe even being who they really are. I mean, that's part of work. And sometimes dentists will look at me and say, well, Connie, I can't pretend I'm happy if I'm not. This is just who I am. Well, then don't be in the public eye. They're in the public eye. When I go on stage, I've been on stage when I'm going through a divorce, or when my kids were sick, or somebody was taken by an ambulance, or, I mean, I've been on the stage all sorts of horrible times.
So you've written 7 books. I'm on Amazon. Which book, if my homies had to start with one of your books, which one would you start with?
Life would be easy if it weren't for other people.
Life would be easy
if it weren't
for other people.
It's basically how to deal with idiots.
Okay, well, I see you. It's all 5 stars. Life would be easy if it weren't for other people. We'll talk about that. Let's go through. Let's start with that book.
Okay.
Life would. So it's a book about dealing with idiots.
Yes, but most people by about chapter 2 are seeing themselves so much that they realize that really the title should probably be Life Would Be Easier If It Weren't For You. That's probably if I could have titled it the way I wanted, because that's really, we're the ones. We're our own worst enemies. We sabotage ourselves. We criticize ourselves. We make stupid choices. We don't, you know, we're too aware of what's not important and totally unaware of what is important in life, and especially in relationships. You know, you talked about the divorce rate with dentists. Well, I mean, I can tell what a marriage is going to be like just by seeing a dentist one time. If they're not going to talk to me, they're not talking to anybody. You know, if they don't know how to communicate and have fun with me or their staff, then they don't know how to do it with anybody, their spouse or their kids or anybody. And it's hard. You know, they say that marriages are broken up from communication. It's not they're broken up from communication. They're broken up from lack of communication. You know, it's not that people are communicating too much. They're not telling what they need, you know. And I also think, and for the male dentist, a lot of them are really tired of being around women. And I get that, and I'm going to have some women killing me now, but I mean, we can be a little more drama, and we can, not every woman that's listening to this, oh my goodness, just disclaimer again, but you know, we can be a little more emotional, we can be a little more drama. We also say what we need, we tell people, we expect more, we expect more from promises of people, so there's all good and bad, but a dentist, other than an OBGYN, is probably one of the few men, a male dentist, who is surrounded with females at home and at work. And that's tough too. I think sometimes what they do at home, and I know some of them will say this, they're so tired of dealing with women all day and their problems and their needs that when they go home, they don't even want to talk to their wife or their daughters because they're done with it. You know, if they worked with guys all day, I work with guys in the construction work, and they can't wait to get home to their wife and daughters because it's so refreshing, it's so different because they've been working with the guys and their testosterone and their argument and their debating and so I think that hurts marriages sometimes too. You know, not that they're doing anything with the women at work, they're femaled out sometimes by the end of the day, but I'm going to put it back on the male dentist now. They create a lot of the drama. They create a lot of the emotion that comes out. It isn't necessarily the women that are doing it. The male dentist allows too much to happen. They don't get in there. They don't solve problems. They don't have crucial conversations. They don't, you know, they have no tips, strategies, or techniques for how to deal with the woman in the front that's not talking to the woman in the back, or one that comes in late. And so what they do is they go back, close their door, and they avoid it. They just avoid it. So everybody is allowed to do whatever they want to. And so the couple, one or two women in the office who are kind of a pain in the neck and bossy and arrogant or hormonal or mad or whatever they are, they can get away with murder now, and they begin to run the office, and your good people leave. I tell this to my dentist. I said, your avoiding isn't making it better. You know who's going to leave? The good ones. The bad one, she will be with you the rest of your life. She will follow you to your grave. She's not going anywhere because you don't want to get rid of her. But the good ones, the ones who are kind and compassionate and get along and engage and have great relationships, they'll be out of there in an instant.
It's so amazing because the reason there's such an intense continuing education with all these institutes all around the world is because the dentist, he's so miserable in the office, he's so miserable at home that instead of solving anything, he looks so forward to, oh my God, Thursday after work, I'm flying to the Institute of how to be the best dentist in the universe and stay in a resort. And it's escapism.
Yes.
And it's like, dude, why are you learning these technical skills at $3,000 a weekend? Why don't you just fix your toxic environment at home? And I've known a lot of these guys for 30 years.
And here's what's so, as a therapist, here's what's so maddening and frustrating and about that is they'll go and take class after class after class on how to be a better dentist, but God forbid they walk into a marriage counselor or a family counselor because they have a kid that they don't get along with, or a spouse that they can't, or a partner they can't talk. Oh, that's terrible. And so, I'll say to them, I don't do therapy. And I go, yeah, you do. You go to 5 conventions a year. That's therapy. Therapy is just when you're learning about a relationship. So because you're going and learning about how to do, a better treatment or how to get along or how to make more money, that's no different than going with your spouse to learn how to have, treat each other. It's the same thing. But they've separated, that's therapy and this is, executive coaching. I kid them and say, I've started telling dentists, I'll be your executive coach. I'm really going to be their therapist, but they don't want that. But if I'm their executive coach, that seems okay.
So then is your other book more the staff dealing with the dentist? You have another book says how to be the person successful companies fight to keep.
No, my next probably book is 10 Ways to Stand Out from a Crowd, and that's just how do you stand out has been my logo. Standout leadership, I do standout sales, I do standout relationships. Standout just stands for how do you blow away the competition. And you brought up something else about the dentist, the one that can sell the deal and the 6 that can't. The same thing in speaking. There's tons of speakers out there that, the economy's not right and I just can't sell and no one will hire me and no one will pay my fee and no one has the money. Well, meanwhile, there's tons of us getting the money and getting our fee and speaking. And it's not, it's a few things. One, it's maybe my speech is better than theirs. Maybe my attitude is better than theirs. Maybe my sales technique on the phone is better than theirs. It isn't, and not just dentists, but people in sales who don't want to be in sales love to give excuses. The first one is price and economy. Price is too high, economy's horrible, I can't sell it. And then the next one is, well, no one really wants to buy this, I can't explain it well. And the next is the brand, no one heard about me. And then there's territory. Well, look where I live. If I lived in that town, they would spend more for a dentist, but look what I live. And really all of those are excuses. Any dentist that says that territory is his problem or the economy is his problem, I could find another dentist right in the same area with the same economy and the same city and the same everything who's making a fortune. Because none of us want to say, hey, I think it's me. I don't think it's the economy. I don't think my wife or spouse is leaving me because I work too much. I don't think I can't get a good staff to stay with me because the hours are too long. At some point, people have to start saying, I think it's me. And every dentist I've worked with who comes to me because they're not making the money or they don't have the staff or they have too high a turnover or they hate their job or they can't stay married, the first thing I say is, this is going to all be about you. And they go, I know. Because they know me. They know if they come to me, there's no BS. They know that I'm not going to, let's talk about they know I'm going to get down and dirty and say, here's why you aren't making money. Here's why spouses won't stay with you. Here's why your kids won't talk to you. Here's why you hate your job. So now let's learn it, and now let's move on.
So is that an age thing? Because everyone blames everything on everyone else. It's truly a gift to realize that the man in the mirror is responsible for everything that went right or wrong. Is that part of the journey? Or?
It's part of the journey. There is no journey. It's part of staying in the same little town your whole entire life. The journey doesn't begin until you stop blaming other people. Yeah. You're at the beginning of the journey. You're on the dock.
But do you think like 25-year-olds blame everything on everyone else, and by the time they're 50, it's 50-50? Or is it something that because you just had 6,000...
I don't see it as much at age of blaming people as the way you grew up. If you grew up in a home where everybody blamed everybody and everybody was mad and everybody was tired and everybody was exhausted, the odds are pretty good that's what you're going to do. If you grew up in a home where people kind of took responsibility and they tried to find solutions and they collaborated as a family and they made decisions together and, it was fairly respectful, then that doesn't always true. There can always be one kid that, where did this kid come from? They must have been switched in the nursery. But a lot of it just is you're growing up again.
So I want to shift gears from old guys like me down to the babies who just walk out of school. Last week we had 6,000 25-year-old babies just walk out of dental school, and here's Disneyland versus reality. Disneyland is, you're right, birth rates are plummeting. Like in Japan, it's under one child per family. It's 0.9 because they sit there and say, God, look at my father. He stressed out in high school to get the best college, and he got a job at Honda. He worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and dropped dead.
Well, and this is why
I don't want to do that.
This is why people can talk about the millennials, and I usually really are their advocate. We created the millennials. The millennials, it's not that they don't have a work ethic. It's not that they don't want to work. But they don't want to do it the way we did it because we sucked at it. And we were miserable and unhappy and divorcing and hating our jobs and end up retiring with no money. I mean, the millennials grew up with parents who wanted more money and who both worked jobs usually, and came home. When I interviewed a group of kids a few years ago, young people, not kids, but young people, I said, give me 2 words to describe your parents. Tired and angry. Tired and angry. And that 5-year-olds answered that way. Tired and angry. So you have these millennials growing up in a home where everybody's tired and everybody's angry and everybody's pissed off and nobody's happy. And yet the parents are saying to the kids, but you need to go to school and get a job and do what we're doing and make money. Well, if we grew up in a home where they were working 2 jobs, coming home late, and were happy and loving and hugging us and caring for each other, and we were having a ball, then they would have adopted our same work ethic. But we're trying to shove our work ethic down the throat of somebody who's too smart to swallow it. They saw the results, and the results are horribly painful for these kids.
The 2 most successful characters on Sesame Street during the whole time was Oscar the Grouch and Big Bird, which is played by the same guy.
Right.
Until Elmo came along, and then Big Bird and became number 1. But that's what the guy who said, he said Oscar the Grouch was so successful because little kids identify that as his dad, sitting in the chair and they're barking at the TV and and it's
I'm even older than you are. I'll put it out on the air. I'm even older, but my dad worked long hours and he traveled, and I'm not saying that he didn't come home when he was a little tired, but my parents weren't miserable. My dad I never heard the words miserable come out of his mouth. He'd say, I'm tired, but we did our vacations in the station wagon and we grilled out and we all played baseball at night. So I grew up in a home where my dad worked and he traveled and he made decent money, but we had fun with the money. When he got a raise, we'd go buy a new car as a family. And I always knew we got a bonus in June, and in July we packed up in the station wagon and went 3 weeks and visited all the state parks. So in our house, him working hard, it didn't defeat our family. It didn't, create a horrible family. It was.
But I want to go back to my original question. Though, I didn't get out all the way. So they have this deal where they saw their parents. They own a deal, and it was sucked, and it was this deal. So they have this fantasy. Oh, I'm just going to go get a job as an associate. Then I don't have to work like that. I don't have to wear all these hats in marketing and leadership and this and this and this. And they're miserable. They job hop. By the time they've been out of school 4 years, they've had 4 different jobs.
Okay.
And
Wait. I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
You're making an assumption that isn't always true. I know a lot of them that have job hopped and are not miserable at all. Every single job. My daughter's had tons of jobs. My youngest one, I don't think she would be where she was if she hadn't had those different jobs. Every job she was on, there was something amazing she learned from that one job. And then she went to another and learned something. And when I see where she's at now and what she's done, there's no way. There's no way she could have gone to work for one company and been where she is now with the breadth and width of, and I job hopped, okay? I mean, I can't even tell you how many jobs I've had and where I've worked. And what's it done for me? I don't have to niche. Most speakers are in trouble because they can only speak to dentists. They can only speak to customer service. They can only speak, they get tapped out in that one industry. I can speak to anyone, anywhere. I mean, my target audience is if they have my fee and they're breathing. I mean, that's basically all the requirements I have. So I can speak to anyone. Why? Because I've done so many things in my life. So I'm not saying some of them are miserable, but we grew up with, the only reason why you leave a job is you're unhappy. But that's not the only reason why some of them are leaving a job. They're not leaving it because they're unhappy. They're leaving it because they got tapped out. In other words, they learned what they learned, and they look around, and it's going to take them 10 more years to get to this place, and they go someplace else and learn something, and then they look around and go, oh, that will take 8 years, and they go here. And who knows? They may end up with some of the most unbelievable, valuable experience ever.
Well, the point I was making is that if they go and look at the people that graduated from their same dental school 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they're not going to show me any data where somebody went and got a job and worked for Larry for 10 years and was all happy. They jump around until they finally hit rock bottom and open up their own practice. Whereas our generation, when I came out of school 30 years ago, I graduated May 11, had my own office open September 21st. Took me 133 days, but they job hop for 4 or 5 years before they find, it's almost like they know they have to go out and mow the backyard, but they know they have to learn how to swim, but they want to walk around the swimming pool for 4 or 5 years. So is that a good thing, bad thing? What would you tell someone? Would you say just suck it up, buttercup, and open it up today?
I would tell them that they're exactly what we created. They're exactly what we created. We rescued our kids. We paid their fines. We paid their speeding tickets. We bought them cars at 60. I mean, if they were in trouble, I quit teaching really not because of the kids, but because of the parents. I mean, they're at the school all the time. I spoke to a major grocery store chain not so long ago with all the general managers, and I said to them, "What's your biggest problem with some of your newer, employees?" And they said, "Their parents." Now, this is a grocery. We're talking not school. And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we can have 20, 25, 28-year-olds." And we'll put the schedule out, and then mom will show up and yell at us because, that's not fair because so-and-so didn't work Saturday last month, and they have a wedding, and he's got to go to the wedding. And they said, well, then he'll get fired. And they'll say, well, fine. And he can live at home for a while, and we'll help him find another job. Well, so I keep telling older people, we can't be mad at a group of young people that we raised. They only learned all this from us. Or they're rebelling against what they saw, which is what we all did. I mean, all of us did that, right?
Yeah.
So rather than get all worried about them, I just say everybody has to kind of learn on their own journey. And we have tons of 50-year-old and 60-year-old dentists who aren't happy, and they did it the way we think. They started their own, and they're still miserable. So who knows? We're not going to know the answer to the question you just asked me until these people are 50. Then we'll know whether going to 6 and 7 different jobs before they stop their own. When they're 50 and they're happier, then that was right. If they're 50 and they're miserable, then guess what? No way works. Everyone's going to be miserable at 50 regardless of what they do, which would be really sad.
I can't believe we already did an hour. So what are my, if they want you to speak at your next meeting, your website is Connie Podesta, Connie, C-O-N-N-I-E, last name Podesta, P-O-D-E-S-T-A. What are they going to find at ConniePodesta.com?
Well, one thing I want to say, though, is I have never been this serious in 1 hour in my whole life. So, the people listening to me, here's what I want to tell you is I'm thinking about, and you did. You said you were going to take me to a dark place, and you took me and put me in a hole for an hour. But, what I want to say to the people talking is this isn't all of this of what I'm doing on stage. I really, really am funny, and I'm interactive, and I don't use PowerPoints. And yeah, I get into psychology, but not like we've done here. So, I don't want someone listening to this to think, oh my God, if I bring Connie in, everyone's going to quit or commit suicide, leave their family, or leave the job. That's not what I'm after at all. But I do hope on this conversation, I never get to dig this deep, that at least we've gotten them to think about that no one has to stay unhappy. That's the power of therapy, and that's why I'm so frustrated because most people won't go. And I'm going to pick on men this time because that's just the way it is. I don't talk genders much because the genders have blurred a lot, which is great. But when it comes to reading self-help, looking at yourself, going to therapy, men are much, much, much more resistant than women. And I think it's a shame in industries like dentistry, because therapy isn't just somebody telling you all the things you're doing wrong. Therapy is helping you understand how to find real happiness in this really short, crazy, inside, messed up, screwed up world. And why would no one want to, I don't get why anyone wouldn't want to take advantage of that. And what I get so angry at are people that come to me and say, I'm unhappy. And I say, well, let's try. No, I just don't want to do it. So if you're listening to me and you're unhappy, oh my God, then do something. Go see someone, get some help, read something, change your job. Don't be a dentist, go on a vacation, save your money. But spouses of people who are unhappy at work are going to leave. At some point, they're going to leave. And they're not going to leave because they didn't like the person or that they didn't love the person. They're going to leave because the person was miserable, and instead of changing their life and doing something about it, they decided to come home and take it out on every human being that had any possibility of loving them. And that's why. People don't leave people like that because you work too long or you don't make enough money. They leave because if you're miserable, change it. I know wives and spouses that will say to a spouse, I'll make less money. We can move houses. Just be happy. Nope, can't do it. And that's what's happening in dentistry. Spouses are leaving not because you're working too long. They're leaving, and they're not really leaving because you're miserable. They're leaving because you won't take positive action to get rid of the misery and do something with your life. And what's going to happen is you're going to be miserable alone now. I mean, right now you're miserable with someone in a family, but you're going to be miserable alone. When there really is people you can talk to and people you can help and training you can get and an understanding you can get that could change your whole life.
I can give you the names of 100 dentists who say Connie was the best speaker that they ever saw. I mean, people are raving fans about you, and you are a comedian. I'm sorry, this isn't really the format to be a comedian. I mean,
I know. Next time,
you feed off a crowd.
Here, I want to say one more thing, and if you guys need to hang up after now,
no. We don't have to hang up. We'll stay here until 40 days and 40 nights.
I want all of you listening. The next conference, because this is another little, what do you call it, bug in my craw, thing I don't like. Go to the next dental conference and add up how many workshops or sessions are about any of what we talked about. Just count how many in a 3 or 4 day have anything to do with personality, dealing with people, selling, marketing, how to have a better marriage, how to create a better business, how to be a happier human being. There are times, honestly, and I'm very thankful for all the dental groups over the past 25 years who have hired me, but often I'm the only one. I'm the only, maybe there's somebody doing a breakout on time management or balancing home and career, but often I'm the only one. And what does that say? I want all of you watching, listening today, ask yourself, what does that say? Everything's about clinical and technical. I get it. That's your craft. But at what point are dentists going to demand from their industry that the industry and the conventions and the CEs and the schools start treating what their real problem is? Their real problem is depression. And the depression's coming because they've not been taught one single thing about how to run a business, deal with people, motivate people, empower people, document people, have a marriage, talk to their kids, communicate, sell, and market.
And there's research saying, agreeing what says 30 years ago, research went down a dark hole because 90% of all the people who had TMJ were all women. So they started saying, well, it has to be estrogen. It has to be all this stuff like that. Well, then the epidemic, it took them 15, 20 years to figure out. It was because only women raised their hand and had help and went to the doctor. The men had the
They had TMJ too.
Yeah, they had TMJ. They just didn't tell anybody. And a big part of why men die at 74 and women are 79 in 6 months. One of the biggest reasons of why they live 5 years longer. I just had an emergency room physician here on the show, and it's amazing. Like they pass out and then they come and the guy's like, well, Grandpa, how long have you had black water diarrhea? Mm-hmm. So it's true, men don't get help. I mean, when we were little...
let's end on sex, or let's end on laughing, or let's end on something but that visualization.
But it's so true. I remember the biggest fight I ever saw my mom and dad get into.
You're just going to keep going with the black water.
The biggest fight I ever saw my mom and dad get into was we drove to Disneyland. My dad was so lost in LA, and all she wanted him to do was stop at a gas station and ask directions. Right. And it would have just been, my dad was incapable. I mean, that was, he couldn't do that. And finally, so men just don't ask for help, is what you're saying.
And I appreciate when you say hundreds of dentists have said good things. I think I feel very proud of what I've been able to bring to dentistry. It's very minute. Tons of people listening to me have never heard my name. I'm not in the dental speaker out there list for everyone to see. But the groups who bring me in are dentists who know what I do, and they know how deep I dig, and they know that I'm going to do something with their teams and their audiences that no other dental speaker is going to do. I'm not a dental professional. You've got tons of people to talk about that. I'm a life person, human being, happiness. Well, I don't even say happiness. Happiness is such a fluff word, but it's the opposite of depression. And if I can alleviate that, and I can teach them how to be comfortable selling without it being sales, and asking for money, and helping people through giving them the right treatment and hiring the right people, and just having it be a job that I love. The two questions I always give people at the end is, number one, when you go to work, is this where you want to be? Is this what you want to be doing all day? And most dentists, many of them will say no. So there's question number one down the two. And the second question, when you go home at night, is that where you want to spend your time at home? And my answer is yes. I love going to work. I love going home. Now that I wasn't able to answer yes to both of those a lot of my life. I hated my job and loved going home, or I loved going home, loved my job and hated going home. But that's what I would leave with for the dentist. If you don't love what you're doing, then do not the weaker approach is not therapy. That's what men don't get. The weaker approach, the reflection of a weak man is not the guy that goes and gets help or gets therapy and understands and goes on to be a happy, vibrant, sexual, educated, fun, great boss. That's not the weak position. Does that sound weak to you, any of those? The weak is to stay paralyzed in a block of cement, doing a job with people you don't like, who drive you crazy, with customers you don't like, doing a job you don't like, and going home to a home that you don't like. There's no weaker position in the world for any human being, male or female, than to take and to accept that that's your lot in life. And that's what's going to happen to you the rest of your life. I mean, why would anyone, male or female, resign themselves to that when there's a whole life? I've been there, and I understand it, but there's a whole life out there that you're happy when you go to work and you're happy when you come home. And I'll tell you what, that's an amazing way to live your life.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my show today, all the way from Dallas, Texas. It was a huge honor, and I probably had 100 dentists request you to come on the show. They love your lecture, and my gosh, get your next meeting fired up, get your staff fired up. You always call it the soft stuff. The soft stuff is 10 times more important than the technical stuff.
And the soft stuff is 10 times tougher. It's not really soft at all. This was probably a tougher than any clinical thing I'll ever have. The toughest thing in the world is to look at yourself. And the toughest thing in the world is to do what needs to do for you not to be miserable. It's much easier just to resign yourself.
All right, on that note, Connie, thank you so much for talking to my homies today.
Do I get my wine now?